Alright, this is a quick video on a couple of lesser known reasons as to why these older V4 Evinrude Johnson OMC engines will overheat. Even if you've got a new water pump, it's pissing really strong and you've got good pressure and everything else, but you're still getting an overheat issue. So a lot of people don't realise that within the heads themselves are two little pieces of rubber which are called water deflectors. So this one's the original one that was in the block, and it's not the reason mine was overheating. But on older motors, that's the part number there. On older motors, what happens is these will swell up, and as they swell, they will literally overcome those two aluminium extrusions and they'll close the jacket. And you end up with a block. The reason that's bad is because how these actually flow water-wise is here. So this is the original workshop manual. So you can I'll do this so you can pause for a second and give yourself an idea of how they flow. We're obviously talking about the V4. So it comes through the intake screen at the bottom of the lower unit, through the water pump, pumps up into the center of the block, through the exhaust plate, which is the center of the motor. So it all starts here, feeds to the back of the block, circulates the whole middle section of the block, and then begins to feed out the bottom of the cylinder heads. Now there's another water deflector that sits here. I've pulled it out because I'm replacing them, but there's another piece of rubber identical to that sits here that blocks this jacket. So the water enters, it can't go right because it needs to build up all through here. It also stops here because it's blocked by that deflector, all through here. There's reliefs, pressure reliefs at the top of the head, which allows it to flow back into the block, so it won't ever over pressurize as such, but it flows all the way around down to here. Now what happens is, if this is swollen or it's full of salt and it's blocked, it won't make it down to here, which is where it feeds in to the actual top of the cylinder head. So you can see here, this is where it will start to feed into the head itself at the bottom of those last two deflectors. So it feeds in here, fills up all of the water jackets in here as well, then begins to flow through the top of this into your cover as well. So you've got another section of water jackets which are quite deep underneath these cover plates, so where your spark plugs sit. So all of this fills up with water as well, comes all the way around, snakes around, and then, and only then, is when it exits into the thermostat housing. So to give you an idea, the thermostat housing sits in the middle of the block, and the heads, through rubber hoses like this, feed the thermostat housing. So if you're blocked here, or even here, I think it's okay if it makes it here, but especially if you're blocked here, you're not going to feed the very top of the cylinder head, and you'll end up cooking that side of the engine. The other reason that they will overheat as well is in the housings themselves. So these are obviously brand new thermostats, brand new poppet valves. For the housing, I've gone through and cleaned everything, got everything ready to reassemble. The issue with these housings is that there's two metering holes, and these holes are tiny on the other side. So you can see here, literally two pinholes, and they are separate within the housing itself. So this is blocked on either side. So each metering hole, each thermostat, each poppet valve is independent for each side of the engine. So they're individually thermally managed. So this thermostat can open at a different time to this thermostat because they do heat at different rates, because one head, as you can see, is higher than the other. Now, the issue that happens with these metering holes is that if they get blocked, no water will bypass. And if you don't have a bypass, these will just stay closed at idle. And then effectively what happens is, even if this is flowing correctly, it's making its way through the bottom half of the head into the top half of the head, feeding out, exiting through here once it's made its way through the cylinder head and the cover plate. If that's not opening the bypass, those little metering holes, the first lot of water that circulates through before the engine gets hot enough will sit and pool there, and it will stay there because it has nowhere to go. And the rest of the water will just sit. There is reliefs at the top, so it will continue to flow that way and vice versa, but this will just rise in temperature really quickly. So how I worked this out was, when I originally replaced the thermostats, I had a thermal imaging gun on the engine just for diagnostic to see how it was managing its heat. And this head was working perfectly. It's sitting at basically 60 degrees, 65 degrees at idle after sort of 10 minutes. This one, however, started to develop an issue where it would get upwards of 80 degrees, and then the temperature in the thermostat housing down here was sort of around 40 degrees. I couldn't work it out. I couldn't basically understand where the block was in the flow, because to me, before I understood how the water flows, I was originally thinking the water comes this way, out through the thermostat into the head, but it's reverse. So it's stuck there. Doesn't activate the thermostats. This begins to cook itself at idle and low speed because the poppet valves won't open. So it's just something to be aware of. And the reason I stuffed it up is, when I originally put this together, as you can see, the remnants on this part of the housing is I used some Yamabond silicone just to seal it all up. And when you're trying to maneuver this in with the springs under pressure in that tight space, you end up moving the gaskets around. So first step is, don't use silicone, just use a gasket sealer. Don't use a gasket maker. They don't need it. They just need a gasket sealer. Then the paper will actually do the rest of the sealing. It's what's specified in the manual as well. So it's basically the number 2 reasons you might be running into overheating issues, even though you've gone through and you've done the main things. Just to touch on one final part, in case no one is aware how these cooling systems work in regards to the poppet valves. So the poppet valves, they sit on a spring. That spring sits against the block. So when the housing's in, these are under, it's under enormous pressure, spring tension. So they'll stay closed as this is pushing against this to keep it closed. The only time it will open is when you've got an extreme amount of water volume and pressure, and that only happens when you are in gear. So it won't happen if you rev, to my knowledge, because I think that's actually connected to the drive shaft. So the drive shaft down to the lower unit passes through the water pump, and that's what spins your impeller. So obviously, if you're a neutral, it won't spin the water pump any quicker. It's just free spinning the engine in neutral. So when you're underway and when you're up at speed, the pressure will increase so much that it overcomes that spring tension, and then effectively these open up and they bypass the thermostat on both sides. So you might have an issue with low speed cooling. Idle, it overheats when you're idling, but then when you're underway, the alarm never goes off. That's because, generally speaking, the poppets, if they're working, will be doing their job. If you're overheating all the time, it's likely the deflectors, in which case you need to take the head off. One tip for removing these heads, because a lot of them are obviously saltwater engines, You can get to the back of them by loading them up with penetrant. So I think I literally started just spraying this thing down with penetrant when I first got it. So you can get to most of them. So obviously soak them as much as you can within reason. The other tip that I have is, even if it is overheating, but if it's running, get a thermal imaging gun and get this head up to a safe temperature. So I got this head up to about 90 degrees Celsius, that is. So once it was at that temperature, obviously shut it down and then started massaging the bolts out, and they came out really smoothly because the whole block is then heated and just makes the extraction a lot easier. Because if you snap one of these, it just turns a simple job into a really hard job. But that's effectively it from a cooling side. I've done a lot more on this motor in terms of obviously rebuilding the carbs and other things just to get it ready in the fuel system, etc. Just to basically give it the best chance it's got of surviving, because it is a low hours motor. Like the cylinders, as you can see, you can still see all the factory cross hatching. So it's a low hours outboard, and the condition of it is just, it's a fantastic condition for something that's over 40 years old and been operated in salt water, paired with a beautiful old boat. But that's it, guys. Hopefully that helps a few of you if you are chasing issues. Water deflectors, metering holes. Have fun.